You are a machine learning enthusiast. I am so sure that you have come through the word random forest. In today's video, we will be answering the question how random forest actually works, and we will also be addressing why random forest is rated so much. So let's begin the video. Let my machine learning problem be that I am trying to predict whether the person is going through breakup phase or not. We observe that once a person is going through breakup phase, he or she gets isolated from others. We also see that they start skipping meal, they start showing some kind of anger, they are confused, and most of the time they get addicted to some kind of new highs. Let these questions be my feature set. Now, once I have a feature set, what I will be doing is that I'll be trying to collect the data, and let's say I have the information of 7 people, and once I tabulate it, let's say that it looks something like this, wherein the right mark or the tick mark represent it is saying yes to the asked question, and into or cross mark represents no to the asked question. For the first person, if I ask whether you are isolated or not, and if he says yes. For the second person, if I ask the question whether he is isolated or not, let's say he says no, and then I represent it by into mark. As we see trees in forest, in random forest, we see multiple decision trees. So before understanding how random forest work, it becomes our duty to understand how basically decision tree works. Now let us take a simple example and try understand how decision tree basically works, and let us not get much into the mathematics of it. In decision tree, you ask series of yes no questions in a certain order to make prediction. Here please note that the word certain order is very much important. Let's say I am trying to predict whether a person is obese or not, and let my questions be like this. First, let me ask whether the person is male or not. Then, if the person is male, then I would ask the question whether the weight is less than 54 or not. If it is less than 54, I would simply say the person is not obese. If it is greater than 54, then I would ask another question of whether the height is greater than 5.2 or not. If it is greater than 5.2, I would say that the person is not obese, and if it is less than 5.2, I would say that the person is obese. Similarly, there would be questions when the person is not male. Now, using mathematics, we try answering the question of which question to be asked first. For example, you can see that here I asked the question whether the person is male or not first, and then I asked the questions rest. If I had asked the question whether the weight is less than 54 and then I asked the question whether the person is male or not, then it would have induced a new tree, and thus I would get some new predictions. The predictions which I got from this new tree would not be same as the predictions which I am getting from this available tree. Now once we have understood how a decision tree works, let us now understand how random forest work. Random forest basically builds multiple trees. Now let us understand how random forest basically builds multiple trees from the given data set. If I look back to my question, I basically have 5 feature points. That is, I am asking the question whether the person is isolated or not. I am asking the question whether the person is skipping meal. I am asking the question whether the person is showing anger or not. I'm asking the question whether he is in confusion, and I'm asking the question whether she is getting addicted to new highs or not. Basically, we can see that there are 5 features. Now, what random forest does is that for building each tree, it would consider a subset of size n, which is predefined by the person. Let's say I say n equals 3. Now, what it would basically do is that it would build tree 1 by considering only the subset which contains features skipping meal, showing anger, and whether the person is isolated or not. Now the tree 2 would be built using the subset whether the person is isolated or not, whether the person is confused, whether the person is addicted to new highs or not. Similarly, there would be number of trees built. Now once the 10 trees are built, when a new data point comes in, the data point will be passed through all the trees and all the predictions will be taken into account. Let's say 7 trees say that breakup equals yes, and the output is no from 3 trees. Now basically what we would do is we would consider the one which has got the maximum vote. Now you can see that 7 trees predicted that breakup equals yes, and then we would finally say that our prediction is yes. Now once we have understood the random forest model, let us understand why it is rated so much. What each tree would represent is that each tree would represent different intelligence ways of predicting the answer to the given problem. Now let us understand what I said by taking an example. Let's say my aim is to build a random forest model to predict the person's name using some feature set, and let's say that I have 3 trees built by this particular feature set. Now the first tree may have built in such a way that it is trying to predict whether the person is Jayachandra or whether the person is Chandra or whether the person is Jaya by looking into the mole positions of that person's. Let's say the person has a mole on his right thumb, a mole on his left cheek, then it would predict the person as Jayachandra. Tree 2 may have built in such a way that it is looking into the eyes of the person and it may be saying whether the person is Jaya or Chandra or Jayachandra. Now tree 3 may have built in such a way that it may be predicting the person's name by looking into the physical body structure of that person. Similarly, there may be n trees built with n different intelligences in them. If all the ways are giving the same answer, then we are more confident of the answer we are getting. For example, if you are trying a mathematical question and if the approach 1 says that the answer is 1, if the approach 2 says that the answer is 1, if the approach 3 says that the answer is 1, then you are sure that the answer is 1. Sometimes the subset may not contain the required information for making predictions, and thus the predictions made by it would not be that great. But in the real world scenario, we will see that both the number of data point and the feature set is so high that it will build so many trees, and most of the time most of the trees will be predicting the correct thing, and hence taking voting system helps us in getting the better predictions.